Welcome to this episode of the Partovi Effect. My name is Mrs. Madi Partovi.
And I'm Dr. Ryan Partovi.
We are going to take you on a ride today and introduce you to the Partovi world of food, why we eat what we eat. I am also very present to the impact that it has on our boys every day. Like when people talk about the terrible twos and the three-nager period of time, I think that gives kids a bad rap. I think it has a lot to do with the way that they're being fed unconsciously.
Yeah, two main things actually. One, they're constantly given a chain of carbs. So it's like their blood sugar is constantly going like this. And so every time it's down here, it's like if you don't give them another snack, right, then you're going to deal with some sort of horrible breakdown because what you're feeding them is basically pure carbs, which gets turned into pure sugar in our bodies. There's that, plus you deal with the pesticide element, and a lot of those are neurotoxic. So it's like, okay, so I'm having to metabolize neurotoxic pesticides, and all you're giving me to do it with is a bunch of carbs. And by the way, your brain actually diminishes its glucose metabolism, so its energy production, if there's insufficient amino acid pool for it to draw from to make new proteins. So in other words, if you're not getting enough protein with your carbs, which if you're feeding your kid Cheerios and goldfish, and that's your idea of good snack for your kid, then they end up amino acid deficient, protein deficient. And then as a result, their brain capacity, the brain activity, frankly, actually goes down to like bare survival mode and doesn't have the opportunity to actually grow and develop and learn new things. This is why one of the biggest things that we're talking about with regard to how we can actually make this world a better place in terms of school outcomes and education and children who are impoverished is actually making sure that they're fed. Because if kids aren't fed, they can't learn. And Mother Hilt was talking about that at church a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about our food, our eating ministry. That's a huge part of. Do you remember she shared? Were you in the room when she shared the story about the little boy who wasn't getting breakfast?
I think Jean-Luc is awake.
Okay, so we can pause.
We're coming back from a pause as our son Jean-Luc woke up and he had symptoms. And he said, Mama, I want to read. He wanted to read. So we gave him magic yogurt, which is plain sheep yogurt with a capsule of quercetin, vitamin C, and then there's N-acetylcysteine. And then you were very sweet and thoughtful. You read a few pages of Tiki Tembo Masa Rimbo. What is his name?
Tiki Tiki Tembo, No Sa Rimbo, Charibari Ruchi, Pip Peri Pimbo. It's a Partovi family classic.
All right. Before you tell the story of the boy, I'd like to. I was going to share something funny.
Okay.
So in that whole world of extreme indulgence with the candy, and my brother and I used to do buffets. Like we could put down food, and you know that because when you first met me, you're like.
Well, when I first met you, I thought I was the buffet master because one of the most affordable ways when you're young and we'll say financially challenged to be able to get your fill eating foods that are blood type friendly would be to find a buffet where they have a lot of vegetables and salads, and you can also get some protein. And so in my occurring, I was a master of not only finding those buffets, which I still am. I mean, they're few and far between that we would go to nowadays. But the bigger thing was also putting away a fair amount of food. And I thought I was the champion of the world when it came to that until I met your brother. And then I was like,
I think all the rules that were made by buffets were because of us, the Huangs, okay? Because oh my gosh, I remember we were at an Asian buffet And
I
so
think I know
this
this one.
is just so uncouth and socially unacceptable. And they were like, "You've been here for an hour."
Oh, I love this.
Okay, so the other side of that story is when I did the yoga teacher training to become a yoga teacher, it was 200 hours over 16 days at the White Lotus Foundation. And the food they provided there was so wholesome, and so it was, freshly cooked every night, and there were snacks, and so, oh my gosh, this is like my ultimate buffet, right? So
Mhm.
I was just like, gobble. And then I was a little perplexed because, okay, I was cutting weight, even though I was eating all this food,
Mm.
this kind of food, and doing yoga twice a day.
Yeah.
So, okay, there's something to this. There must not be any hormones or antibiotics or chemicals in this wholesome food I'm eating.
Makes a difference.
It makes a difference. So,
Yeah.
yes. And I,
My other main mentor in the realm of naturopathic medicine was Dr. Walter Crinnion, who unfortunately is no longer with us, but he wrote the book, I want to say it's Clean, Green, and Lean, which is exactly about that, how toxins impact our health, especially our metabolic health. And I believe the foreword of that book is written by Dr. Diadamo because they were very good friends back in med school. In fact, they would tag team on patients. And it was basically like the way I've heard the story, which I think it's been long enough that I can share this story in terms of, especially since Walter is no longer with us. Basically, would the resident would come in or the attending would come in and say, okay, well, this is what I want you to do. And then they would leave and Walter and Peter would be like, okay, so this is what you're actually going to do. So they would go against their attending. I'm not advocating for that, just so we're clear, but that's the generation of naturopathic physicians that they were. And they were also, it also speaks to sort of who they were as physicians and as people, just very confident and very knowledgeable. As Walter said to me one time on rotation, he said, Partovi, you're kind of a know-it-all, aren't you? And I was like, yeah. He's like, he gave me a big smile. He's like, that's why you're here. And I mean, I love Walter Crinnion. I miss him. So, but yeah, that's that whole toxicity piece really informs my practice, not just in terms of, it's not just, to me, good health comes from getting the bad stuff out of the body, including avoiding putting bad stuff in the body. And I got all that from Walter. And it's also putting the best stuff in the body, the things that the body needs. I got all that from Peter. And to me, if you have those two, if you're pulling the bad stuff out, putting the good stuff in, the body will do the rest, you know? So,
so I'll tell you about our two little boys and how heartened I am to witness the power of this way of eating and approaching food has impacted their lives.
well, before you
Right?
do that, I want to
Yeah.
finish what I was saying about that little boy,
Yes.
because
Okay.
I still didn't do that because we went on
Okay.
a break. So the story of this little boy is literally he's not getting food at home. So he would come into school every morning and the teachers would put an assignment in front of him and he literally would work on that assignment all the way till lunch and wouldn't be able to finish one assignment. And so then they were able to get him breakfast. And then it was like this kid just blossomed. And he turned out to be this highly gifted child that was able to do really well in school. But just without that basic nourishment, the brain literally goes into survival mode. There's no learning, there's no performance, there's nothing possible outside of survival when your brain is not getting sufficient protein and carbohydrate and fat, of course, as well to make cholesterol. So I mean, 30 to 33% of our brain is cholesterol. That's a whole nother conversation, right?
Yes, the debate, the cholesterol debate.
Cholesterol debate, right? Yeah. Yeah, no, that's one. I mean, I mean, we could certainly talk about it. I would love to get two experts kind of on either side of that debate and have them and hash out a conversation with them because I'd love to get clear on a consensus around what's so regarding cholesterol. I think it's something that we should put that on our to-do list.
Yeah, so if you know anybody, I'm speaking to our community. If you know anybody that would like to come onto our podcast to have that discussion and to create the consensus in a peaceful way, please send them our way.
Well, and what that looks like is somebody who has a view on it and they have an expertise around it, but they're open to changing their mind if they're presented with sufficient evidence. And that's how we are. And so our goal is to find people like that. Sometimes it's not always possible, but at the end of the day, we're the ones creating the consensus. We're the ones helping you separate the wheat from the chaff and saying, okay, well, that guy really wasn't very credible because he wasn't willing to actually concede that he might be wrong on something. And I think my patients all know that I am not one of those doctors who will never say, I don't know, or I was wrong. I'm definitely the first one to say, if I think, I mean, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so this is rare, but if I make a mistake, I'm the first one to acknowledge it and apologize. And then, yeah, I mean, and if I don't know the answer, ultimately, I'll just say, well, I don't know, or this is my best guess, but I really don't know. Because, I mean, to me, that hubristic, old-fashioned, and I'm very old-fashioned in a lot of ways, as Maddie will tell you, but that sort of, I know everything, kind of that some doctors do is just, it's so inauthentic to me. I don't get it, you know?
Yeah.
It was one of the things I didn't like, frankly, about allopathic school. In my clinic entry exam, that was one of the last things I did there. They told me that I needed to, because I was really straight with the patient. I was like, this is my first time doing this. So thank you for being patient with me. And I apologize if something is not quite the way you would have expected it. And to me, that was just being honest and open and forthright with this patient. And yet after the exam, one of the pieces of feedback I got was, you should never say that to a patient. You should never tell them that it's your first time doing something. You should pretend like you've done it 100 times. And that's the mindset that they have in this sort of, we're an industry, we have standards of professionalism to maintain. And this is like, we have to put on the front as if there's like every single person who walks in there, even the guy who just started yesterday, his first day of med school, is a font of knowledge and wisdom of medical science. It's like, no, he's not, you know? And it's just, to me, it's just dishonest, frankly, in my view. And I hated that. That was, to me, probably the most defining moment that actually had me be like, this is not for me. Yeah. There were other things too, but we can talk about that another time. All right. I want to hear about the boys.
To see this, our approach to food, like working in their lives as they continue to grow. I took Ryan, our 7-year-old, I picked him up from school. He spotted a nursery that we had never seen, and he requested to go there. So I said, okay, let's go to the nursery.
This is like a plant nursery,
Yes.
just to be clear. Not a baby nursery, baby plant nursery.
Yes. And he enters the nursery, and the first area is a little grocery store. And so he walks in and he's observing everything, and he gets a bag, like one of the little bags for fruit and vegetables, and he gets himself a young coconut. And I said, okay, let's add a couple more to your bag. And then strolls around the nursery and he sees seeds. Right? And he's staring at it and he says, I can't choose, like broccoli or turnips. Or I said, okay, why don't you choose 3? So he chose kale He chose broccoli and he chose turnip seeds. And then he notices that he's
Next time you go to a place with seeds, by the way, get a few packets of clover seeds,
okay.
like red clover. I've
Yeah.
been meaning to buy some red clover seeds. I haven't. We can cut this out if you want to, but
That's fine.
it's all been on my shopping list for weeks, and I just never go to a place that sells seeds. So
Yeah, now we know.
Now you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm just witnessing him, right?
Mhm.
And it's just such a beautiful thing. He notices that he needs some protein. So he discovers the beef jerky and he makes sure that it doesn't have mama, this is the one that doesn't have sugar in it.
Mhm.
So we get a packet of those. And it was such a beautiful thing. This little 7-year-old making his own empowered choices around food
Mm.
in the grocery store. And then I took him to Central Market one day and
Which is, by the way, just exactly the opposite of what people expect. They're like, oh, well, if you're really strict with your kids around what they can eat when they're little, then the moment they have self-determination, they're going to go and just go crazy eating whatever. I just don't, I've never seen that really to be the case.
no, because
In fact, I would say that it was the indulgence of my father, who I'm not going to necessarily fully roll under the bus when I say this, but I'm just going to the bus may run over your toes here, Dad. Um, was very much from that old school mindset, the old world mindset, which is, oh, just it's better to be a few pounds overweight than a few pounds underweight, because then you might really get in trouble health wise. And so just let him eat whatever he wants. And that my parents were always in tension on that front. And I think it took me sort of processing that. And I didn't talk about this yet, so I'm going to mention it briefly here. It took me kind of processing through that and kind of coming out the other side of it and really seeing my mom's side of it, because she'd obviously grown up in this culture in which we had such abundance, where it's like, no, you do actually have to regulate your intake. And I think that's something that, frankly, I still struggle with. You know that. I mean, my whole thing is it's almost like it's really a challenge for me not to overeat. And so one of the reasons why I have to be even, I think, more restrictive than maybe most people would have to be in terms of following my Swami is that sorry, I'll fix that. Yeah. So one of the reasons why I have to be so strict with my Swami is that I know that if I do eat something that's borderliney for me or not acceptable, that I'm probably not going to just have one bite of it, right? Chances are I'm going to have. I mean, you remember when the first few years of our marriage, there were times where I would literally go on sugar bingers in the middle of the night, late at night, and would have all these things that they're gluten free, and so they're better because they don't have wheat in them. And I'd have like a bag of these sugary gluten free treats that I would put up at the top of the pantry. And then you'd wake up the next morning and you'd see them not at the top of the pantry, and you knew what had happened. So
I also noticed in your way of being and your attitude and
much grouchier the next day after
refined sugar makes me angry. So thank you for your generous listening. Thank you for joining us.
I'm Dr. Ryan Partovi.
And I am Mrs. Madi Partovi.
And this has been the Partovi Effect, creating the consensus. Thanks for joining us. Be well.